So in 2008, my tech company, known as Navtech, Navigation Technologies, was acquired by Nokia for $8.8 billion. Anyone remember Nokia? We experienced a change tsunami. All of the changes, it felt like they happened in tidal waves. New procedures, new systems, new departments, new titles. And in a sea of change, it was hard to maintain stability, normalcy. And my previously tight-knit team, I was the head of B2B marketing globally, and we'd had a very tight-knit marketing team. But in a sea of change, when the cascades of waves are coming, we knew we'd be broken up, we just didn't know where we would sit. So for a while, we all still sat together, knowing eventually that potentially we would be at odds. I can tell you it sucked. It was hard. But in that moment, I tried to maintain some sense of normalcy. I tried to keep up some of the old habits that I'd had, the things that I felt I could control. So every morning, as I passed the row of desks of my marketing team, I would say, "Good morning, everyone." But after 18 months and 4 different bosses, I decided to take a new job. And at my going away party, one of the women who had sat at that row of desks came up to me and said, "I just want to say thank you for always saying good morning, for treating me like a human being, as if I still mattered. You have no idea what that meant to be acknowledged." And sometimes it's in those unexpected moments of connection that we remember that we're human beings, that we're reminded of our humanity. That as humans, we connect with other humans by valuing other humans. And I feel that in my work, it's very funny, transformational guru, but in my work, I've seen the term value take on outsized proportions. Businesses are constantly looking to increase value. Shareholders are expecting maximum value. Private equity are scrutinizing for optimal value. And Wall Street is continually expecting increased value. Change, what drives change is this constant need for increased value. But value has somewhat taken over. And so what I saw as part of that, and we talked about it a little last night in the conversations I had, my experience comes from mergers and acquisitions. And in mergers and acquisitions, I think I heard it significantly last night, those transactions are driven by trying to increase value. And for me, that was part of the conundrum that I faced. I experienced 3 multi-billion-dollar acquisitions at 3 separate Fortune 500 companies. By the third one, I thought, dear God, this has got to stop. How do I find a better way through M&A? And so I decided to write a survivor's handbook. I felt that some of the issue was because people just didn't have transparency on what to expect. And so I interviewed, over a 2.5-year period, over 60 executives, CEOs, CFOs, private equity, HR leaders, managers, and I asked them to give me their insights, their lessons learned, what they could have done better, what they felt had worked right, and how to help me define the business value equation for the future. And so those of you who have actually looked on your table, you will see a Venn diagram. So the first exercise we're going to do, and don't worry, Venn diagrams I know can scare people. My husband's a lawyer. We aren't going to be doing math. He told me lawyers tend to pursue law because they hate math. At least that's what he says to me when I ask him to calculate the tip. So fear not, this is going to be a little bit of fun. So this is the business value equation, and I'm going to ask you to put in the first circle the company. These were the parts, these are the critical pieces to the business value equation. And you can put underneath the company, you can put in parentheses senior leadership, right? Because essentially that's who drives the company. And then next, the workforce. And then third, shareholders. I talked about all of these people contribute to the value equation in some way, shape, or form. Now The next one, they don't really contribute value, but they demand value pretty much on a daily basis. So in a big red circle or whatever pen color you have, I want you to draw right around that Wall Street. Everyone's part of the value equation for the business success. So here's what's interesting. As I talk to each of these executives and HR leaders, one of the things they said is this was always the focus when they were in the middle of the deals. And again, I should say this stands for every business transformation. I'm giving you an example of M&A because it's the most drastic form of change that you can experience. And I know a number of you are part of M&A deals and helping support clients. But one thing became clear that was the forgotten piece. Anyone want to take a stab at what they think the overlapping Venn diagram piece is that was the critical piece that they hadn't thought of? Customers. Possible. That was a part of the discussion. Thank you for contributing. Anyone else?
Staff.
Very close. So the key piece that they talked about were the people. Now you could say, well, the workforce, that's the people. But when you think about the workforce, you think about it in a big, it's a mass, right? You don't think about individual contributors. And so what they acknowledged was in the focus on the deal and everything it takes to get the deal done, they'd forgotten about the people, the individual contributions. And that's what had undermined the success of the deal. And when they got it right, that's what drove the success of the deal, when they galvanized the people, the individuals, to get them rallied behind. So go ahead and you can put into your form the individual. Don't worry, I'm not going to make you come back to this. We will be having another Venn diagram, as you see later on. So the other piece of the research that came through that was fascinating is the fact that people were not expecting the deal integration, the brand transformation to be as an emotional experience as it was. These are, as many of you know, I'm probably speaking to many who have dealt with it as well, rational thinking cannot be applied to an emotional experience. And so not only was the fact that the people were the challenge and what they had forgotten, but the fact that it was so emotional, and how do you get people through an emotional period? Normal business leadership norms don't always apply. And so these are the things I want to cover as part of our discussion. A big part about it is knowing your value, knowing your team's individual value, and frankly, demonstrating that value for your clients as well. What I've heard repeatedly, and that came up even in our conversations last night, is oftentimes clients have lost sight of what our value is, right? And the reality that that value, having to demonstrate that value every day can get exhausting. And the other point being that humanity seeing that as a strength, demonstrating and understanding that that human connection, how you connect with your teams and how you connect with your clients, can be the core of that connection. And so I'm sharing these insights because what we're going to get into is managing those critical emotions. There were 3 emotions that came up in particular as part of this. And what's interesting is on the humanity as a strength piece, what so frequently came up is it almost feels like being a human is a deficiency nowadays. That given the accelerating pace of change, the fixation on big data, the dawn of artificial intelligence, can you blame us for feeling, though, being a human is a deficiency? And at the same time that we're becoming more robotic, you might say, we're actively making robots smarter and nicer. Think about it. Siri and Alexa always have time for you. You can call them at any moment and make a command. And so remembering that humanity piece and leveraging that as a strength, having that as part of your value creation with your teams and with your clients is what we're going to talk about. But before I get too far ahead of myself, I've kind of made a broad assumption that everyone is dealing with change. Is it fair to say you all have dealt with change in some way, shape, or form? Anyone here who has not dealt with change in any way, shape, or form? Oh, okay. Well, you are my two exceptions. So I've got $10 here. And I would suggest you go to the bar because you're going to be really bored with the next 35 minutes, I think. So feel free at any time, stick around, and if you go, yeah, I don't need to deal with change, then we'll move on. Okay, so the next piece of your exercise, you'll see a box at the bottom underneath your Venn diagram, and it says the effects of. So I didn't want to give it away right away. Put in the effects of change. And you'll see underneath that there's three aspects of change that we experience, witness, or are part of. One's change on the business, change on the workplace, and change on the way we do work. So I'm going to give you a minute to fill that in. I want to bring you into the change orbit and just think about, okay, how has change affected me? How have I seen it affect my business? How have I seen it affect the work that I do? So just take a minute and fill that in. Okay. So let me ask, did anyone write anything positive about change and the impact of change? Do I have a brave soul who said, I'm loving change? Yes?
I think it's fantastic because with change comes opportunities. You just have to be ready to take them.
Right. Absolutely. Anyone else?
Change is only positive if you're in control of the consequences of the change. Otherwise, you're more the passive result.
Mm-hmm.
Okay if you can influence the outcome.
So if everyone hear that, change is okay if you can influence the outcome. So two very good points. Anyone else have a positive one? Okay, how about some of the things you see that are affecting the way you do work? How clients are reacting? Anyone like to share that? We had some very brave souls to share the positive. How about the other implications?
Stressful.
Stressful? Absolutely. Were you just scratching your chin, or are you trying to raise your hand?
I'm scratching my chin.
Okay. I don't want to unintentionally call you out. So one of the things I heard a number of times last night is technology, the impact of technology. You have robo-advisors, you have algorithms essentially replacing tasks that humans used to do. And that's having an impact on relationships, particularly with clients. The way you used to learn a client's business is now being done by technology. Yes?
Change creates a driving force that either enables you to improve your business and also puts you in a sink or swim position. The nature of change is to cause change.
Right.
And you have to be able to react to it and deal with it either in a positive way or fold up and die.
Yeah, absolutely. And the comment that was made earlier, change creates opportunity, it's a big part of the book that I wrote, because oftentimes the majority of people don't like change. They resist change. They hold on to the past, and by holding on to the past, they don't see the opportunity ahead of them. And that's a big reason, frankly, that was the motivation for me to write the book, is to be able to see that opportunity and navigate through the change that you experience. Did anyone else have anything burning that they wanted to share? I want to make sure I get back to you if you did have a comment and I cut you off. Okay. Understood. Okay, so in the research, 3 emotions, the CEOs, the executives, private equity included, said there were 3 emotions that how those emotions were managed and handled during the course of the business transformation made it successful or a failure. So I'm going to ask you, just think, I hope I'm not trying to create PTSD for anyone, but I want you to think about a change experience you've had or something you've seen your client go through. They were going through massive change. And think about the feelings that you think come forward and emerge as part of that. So the 3 emotions that came forward were fear, trust, and empathy. These 3 emotions either helped someone to navigate or not. And if they were overwhelmed by the emotion, they were doomed in terms of their ability to succeed. So you will see on the flip side of your handout another Venn diagram. For me, it always helps, I think, particularly for visual learners, it helps reinforce the key takeaway. So the first thing we're going to talk about is fear and how fear manifests. So you will see on your handout, it says to the side there, how does it manifest in times of change? So how does fear manifest in times of change? If you can write down what you've observed, what you've experienced, and fear not, I'm not going to make anyone speak out loud what their answer is on this. So we just kind of want to ground you in what fear does in an organization and how it affects people when they're going through change and transition. So what I've been told a number of times, when fear is the operative norm, the emotion that's driving things, you're confounded by suddenly your inability to make decisions. That it's a change saturation. It overwhelms the brain. Besides the fear of wondering what this means to your job, wondering what it means to the company, how are we going to survive, it equally has an impact on your decision-making skills and your ability to focus. And there are a number of things that now are part of our vernacular that I think, frankly, it's about time they're more in vogue. There's a lot of concentration on mindfulness, on meditation, on breathing to help people given the constant sea of change. And that's not what I'm going to focus on, but I do think it's important to highlight that in the past that was seen as, oh, that's a woo-woo soft skill, but meditation and breathing has really helped a number of organizations get through that. What I focus on, and particularly what's important in the book, is what change does to people and what fear does to people, because people do some crazy things when fear is the operating emotion. And so in my research, because it wasn't just me, I identified 10 personalities. I call them my change cast of characters who emerged. Now these individuals, these characteristics can be present in a work environment normally. And you will, I'm sure, see some of them go, I work with one of those every day. But they come and are more prominent, in particular during a business transformation, particularly in M&A when you're trying to merge two companies together or you're integrating systems and cultures. All of that brings out not necessarily the best of people. And so that's what all these boards are about. I'm going to introduce you to my cast of characters, and we're going to have a little fun. The lesson here will be in not only identifying the personalities that emerge, but how you might work with them, how you might help them if they're a client. And so everyone who said they would help me, flip an easel if you can do that. And I'm going to show you the different cast of characters. Okay, so the easels, my easel flipping friends, if you can do that. And I'm just going to flip through them. There are 10 altogether. And one of the things, so I used to work in advertising, and one of the things, again, that research showed is that cartoons are a great way to bring personalities to life. Anyone watch The Simpsons? There are things that you would accept a cartoon to do that you would never accept a person to do. Are all of our easels flipped? Okay, super. So these are the cast of characters. There are 10, and I had 3 people volunteer. Well, actually, I should say I volunteered them. So, who are going to help me bring our cast of characters to life. So, John, where are you? John, would you say your name?
John Friedemann.
So John has one of my casts of characters, and I've asked him to read out loud a description of the character, and then we're going to talk a little bit about it. So go ahead.
I wield power by dominating others in the workplace. And thank you, Jennifer, for this opportunity to speak today.
You're very welcome.
Since our setting is corporate America, my domination is mostly verbal. I tend to have a fairly significant role in the organization, and frankly, I enjoy wielding my power over others. I managed to maintain my position because, and you can choose one of these, everyone is scared of me. I have photos of everyone, or they think I do. Or, I know some folks quietly get a kick out of seeing me dress down others, never thinking or maybe just praying that my attention will not be focused on them. All of this is to demonstrate that I have the power in this relationship, and it's a power over you.
So John, who do you think of these cast of characters best represents what you just read? Do you want to walk around and then hold it up?
I have to see the ones over here. This one loves people. That's definitely not me. I think I'm the dominatrix.
I want to be very clear. I had a diversity inclusion person look at all of my posters, and he said, you equally skewer both genders, so you should be safe. Thank you, John. That was excellent. Now, anything you would add? Have you witnessed this kind of a character in any of your dealings, either M&A transactions or just business transformation or just change in general that you've experienced?
Am I out of character now?
Yes.
Yes, I have. And what's interesting is when they fall hard. There's no net, and everyone's glad to see them fail.
Absolutely. Absolutely. My book gets into more, thank you, John. My book gets into more detail, and I will, absolutely. And I will, when you fill out the evaluation, if you give me your email, I will make sure you all get my 10 hacks for how to manage each of the personalities, how to identify them. But what is interesting, and John hit the nail on the head, they really don't care about your opinion. Now, they can be a force for good when you are really trying to drive through change. They take no prisoners, but the problem is that afterwards, when they fall hard because they haven't galvanized, they haven't gotten people to rally behind them in a positive way. Okay, so my next, Isabella. Again, I kind of volunteered people, but they've been great sports. So Isabella, if you can read your character.
Okay, some people are going to say I'm really talking about myself. So who am I? This personality believes they know it all, and they go out of their way to make sure you know they know it all. You can spot them in meetings because they are vocal in the discussion with everything they have done or led and how it was successful. They rarely highlight their failures unless they bring it up to say how much they learned from it to pursue their next great success. They are been there, done that type of person. In M&A situations, it will make you wonder why the hell you were acquired, since these guys seem to know it all, seem to know everything. That's because this particular character never thinks to him or herself, why did we acquire this company? They must do, produce, provide some type of service we don't, and they must do it better.
Okay, so who, of the cast of characters that have been revealed, do you see?
I just want to see the turkey behind there. I actually think it's the one behind you, the me.
Yes.
The professor. Actually, it's interesting.
Do you want to come
My
up?
neighbor's mother called me the professor once, so
if you can see this, I'll skip ahead because we've got them here. So it's the company, me, and everyone else around. So, and thank you, Isabel. So actually, let me ask you, have you experienced this type of person in a merger and acquisition or business transformation experience?
Yes, many times. Sometimes I think it's me, but I think, but yes, many times.
So the key, and it is a highlight, the reason why I created these as characters is oftentimes it's us. We may not even realize it. And so part of this is to identify, and I created them as caricatures, but we can tend to be a know-it-all. And why a know-it-all can be destructive particularly, again, in an M&A situation or business transformation, is they shut down the opportunity to collaborate. They really don't listen, they don't pull people in, and particularly when you are trying to bring cultures together, a know-it-all can be destructive. And so what I often say in coaching and counseling, right, when I'm talking about these cast of characters and to have fun with senior leaders, is to talk about, don't be the know-it-all. Show respect for the other side. This is a transformation that requires you to really look at what the other person can contribute. And when you're working with a know-it-all, stay firm and confident in what you know, and eventually you will have the opportunity for them to see that there's more than you know than perhaps they had been listening to. So it's a personality type that lives well beyond the business transformation, but it's important to know about them. So Juan, you are my last person, my last volunteer.
Well, who I am. Prior to the merger acquisition or business transformation in general, this person was the guy. They walk on water, everything they touch turned to gold. If he or she was in sales, they closed the biggest deals. If a product person, they launched the most successful products. Or a marketing leader who turned the brand image into great sales success. Their whole identity is defined by how well they do and are perceived within the company. That can all change when the landscape shifts post-acquisition. What they thought was important and valued seems to have changed, and they struggle with redefining themselves in this new world. It's like watching a rock star who has suddenly learned that the top 5 songs on the Billboard 100 are disco. I have to see the one that is back there. Let me see.
Absolutely.
This, no.
Does everyone know disco? And what I should say, I want to highlight, these are universal characters. I interviewed people globally, so this is not just American-oriented characters. Consistently, when I spoke with CEOs and CFOs, private equity, they said, oh yeah, we've seen this, it doesn't matter what nationality. Okay.
Yeah, I think it's that one. It's kind of sad right now.
Would you like to come on up and... So Juan, have you dealt with this type of character potentially?
Yes. After the merger, after acquisition, he turns to be that is not as good as he think it was.
Yes. And this is probably, thank you. Anything else you wanted to add? You're just happy it's over. The tough part, and really the former rock star, I think everyone has seen this happen to an individual where they've been on top of their game. They have driven the company. They have been that leader that everyone looked to. But during business transformation or post M&A deal, the metrics for success shift quickly. And if they aren't agile and they can't adapt, it becomes very, very tough for them. They continue to believe that what got them to where they are is going to get them to the next level. And so the coaching that I provide there is oftentimes, particularly, they'll be surrounded by people who have always flattered them and have been supportive of them, and that can be very tricky when suddenly they're not the center. So what I always highlight is when you are working, if it's a boss or a colleague, you're reminding them of the great things that they were able to contribute and do successfully, and how to apply that to the new vision, to the new opportunity ahead of them. As said before, change is great. It can be enormous possibilities and potential, but you've got to pivot and you've got to adapt. You can't slow down and wait. Any questions on the personalities or the characteristics? As I said, I'm going to share with you all when you fill out the evaluation. I will share with you, again, it's part of the book, what are the 10 characters and how to manage them and how to deal with them. Okay, and thank you again. Can we give a round of applause for my volunteers? I know yesterday they were, yes?
All 3 of the first 3 are I-centered people.
Yes, very fair point.
And during the continuation of the organization, if it's the acquired entity, to me suggests serious flaws in the acquired entity.
Mm-hmm.
So an astute buyer in due diligence would hopefully uncover this and figure out whether that's going to inhibit
Right.
the strategy going forward, or can it be worked with?
Yes.
If it's the buying entity, whether that I-centered culture is going to destroy the culture of the acquired business.
Very, very true. And I just want to highlight that. We don't have time for it now, but one of the things that I do reveal, because again, it's all about providing some transparency to how people change, is what are the ways to identify in your senior leaders what characteristic types they may be, because they can undermine the success of the deal if they're leading part of the culture integration in particular. So thank you. I'm really glad you highlighted that point. So next, trust was the other emotion that leaders, when I interviewed them, talked about. And what was fascinating, fear happens almost instantaneously. The moment the deal is announced, the business transformation strategy is declared, fear permeates, but it can be mitigated. Trust can dissolve almost overnight. And that, obviously, as each of you knows, trust is the core. It's the foundation for business success. As part of the handouts, you'll see an HBR article I did about after the merger. Don't let us versus them undermine the success. And what the article gets into is the fact that trust dissolves overnight, and that us versus them dynamic manifests in three ways. The obvious one is our company versus their company. You expect that to happen. But again, in the interviews that I did, what came through were other dynamics. You have senior leadership versus the frontline leaders. That us and them dynamic happens almost instantly, because suddenly you have frontline leaders who did not know the change was going to happen, or even if they knew, they weren't aware of the details to the extent that senior leadership, and that can dissolve trust. And then the last is who stays versus who goes. And what was interesting about that is you'll have people on both sides who think the other side got off better. So in those two, in that scenario of trust and the fact that it dissolves, there are two things that I'm going to highlight. I'll get into more in the book, but two things I want to highlight. When you are looking to build trust or rebuild trust, particularly in an environment of constant change, it's the little things that matter the most, the things that you can control. And my opening story is a perfect example of what that looks like. By simply saying good morning to my team, and I'm not necessarily applauding myself, this came through consistently in the interviews that I did. It's the little things that you do. In my case, because I said good morning, it demonstrated that I was thinking about them in a moment where they didn't think anyone was thinking about them. As I said, change can come in tidal waves, and it's often hard to adopt and feel like you can stop it. So to know that you're being thought of and valued helps to rebuild trust. And then the other aspect that I would want to highlight is transparency. The nature of M&A in particular is that everything becomes cloaked in secrecy. Oftentimes it's mandatory, right? You have compliance, you have legal reasons for it, totally understood. But there are aspects of it too where people are just trying to figure out what the answers are. And so there becomes almost a block. But there are ways to be transparent that don't reveal legal or business strategy questions, but there are ways to be transparent that help galvanize your team and bring them along with you. In one interview in particular, he'd gone through 6 M&A, 6 mergers and acquisitions, and he said the leader that stuck out to him the most was the leader who said, listen, I don't know if we're going to be as valued once this deal goes through. I think we've obviously done a great job in our current business environment, and I am hopeful that that will continue to be valued after the change, but I can't say that with 100% confidence. And so he instructed his team, act like every day is an interview. You are interviewing for a job. You are interviewing for an opportunity. Don't fixate on your title. Think about your skills and your expertise and where that applies and where you have an opportunity to contribute that. So those were two of the big feedback points that came out of those interviews around trust and how that emotion, how managing that, how rebuilding trust quickly is important. So I'd like you to, you'll have the other Venn diagram. I neglected to say, make sure you put down trust in that second circle. And on the side, how you've seen trust dissolve, but I'm conscious of time. I want to make sure that we get everything in. The solution that I just shared goes back to the little things and really focusing on those, and the transparency, being transparent and sharing what you know will help them see more clearly the road ahead, and as was said before, what the opportunity might be. Okay, now the third was empathy, and I'm thankful that empathy has gotten, I would say, a rebirth in corporate terms, meaning that it's not seen as a negative, it is seen as a positive. In the past, to be too empathetic a leader was considered a negative. You were a pushover. But what came through consistently in the interviews that I did was how important empathy was in galvanizing a workforce, in helping to bring people together. And I'll share with you an experience that I had that demonstrated this for me quickly. So my second multi-billion-dollar acquisition experience was with Assurion. Assurion is a protection plan company, $5 billion, privately held. They acquired National Electronic Warranties. National Electronic Warranties did protection plans for consumer electronics. So very smart acquisition on their part, but they really hadn't integrated NEW for almost 2 years. And so when I joined, I inherited a team that had essentially been leaderless for almost 15 months. And I actually had the benefit of knowing exactly how they felt. I had been them in my earlier acquisition when Nokia had acquired us. Now I was brought in as a change agent to help them and to get them productive and contributing again. And so as part of this, I interviewed each of them individually and asked them questions. What are the questions that you have? How can I make sure you're feeling as though you understand where we're going? But I also could see that there were a lot of questions that they had that they weren't asking, that they were too afraid. No one wants to ask questions in those moments because you're too worried about what's going to be, what the perception of you will be. And so when I had them all come back together and I went through the list of questions that they had asked me and the answers to them, then I flipped the chart and I said, but here are all the questions you didn't ask me, and here are the answers. Because I know this is what you're wondering, and I know that this is the obstacle for you to feel as though you can contribute. So asking them the questions, but also digging in to consider what are the questions that they're not asking me. And I talked about this a number of times with lawyers that I spoke with. The importance is sometimes people are too afraid to ask the questions. Being smart and empathetic and recognizing they may have questions that they're not asking, let me answer that. Now I know that's hard. My husband always says as lawyers, you never ask a question to which you don't know the answer. But in this scenario, being able to identify what their questions might be and answering them. In this case, one of the guys came up to me afterwards and he said, I thought you were a psychic at some point, because how did you know all the questions that we had? How did you identify what we were thinking? And so by having that moment with them and demonstrating empathy, I got them ramped up a lot faster than they would have normally, because they understood that I was thinking about them in a sea of change and being able to contribute faster because they recognized that I was on their side. I was trying to demonstrate that I understood their issues and pain. So those are the three emotions that can really undermine and or help, depending on how you approach it. And so there are absolutely other emotions that come into play. Agility, curiosity, willingness to learn, political savviness. But what came through in all of my interviews was it was these three emotions in particular that really helped to drive success or not. And the fourth. So this is the emotion that, frankly, was the key. And I highlight this because oftentimes, particularly in deal transactions, this is not the emotion that CEOs in particular have coming to the deal. But this, in particular, was what CEOs repeatedly said to me in their lessons learned. They wish they had come to the discussion with respect for the other side and an understanding of what the other side brought to that, not just from a culture standpoint, but from a business and process standpoint, from their people, recognizing their individual values and recognizing that this deal success relied on having that respect. And the term that I use to help bring it to life is when we think about the marriages that we most admire. They're the marriages where each side shows respect for the other, where you can see that beyond just love, what they bring out the best in each other. And when I spoke with CEOs, they said those were the deals that were most successful. When we looked to the union as a way to bring the best of us together and to be able to optimize and create something new, to see that opportunity, to make it possible. And so I've talked a number of times, particularly last night, 70 to 90% of M&A deals have failed, that being that by the first year they don't achieve the value that had been claimed, but oftentimes that is because of the fact that there wasn't that respect, there wasn't that recognition and an opportunity to bring the full value to life. So in closing, and I know I've gone through a lot of these things quickly. The key for me was to touch on all of the things that came through in the research, to be transparent with what people go through, how they react to change, the emotions that come forward, how the cast of characters emerge. The important thing is to recognize that these personality types are not permanent. People will go back and forth from one personality type to another. But the key is to recognize that fear doesn't always bring out the best in people, and it's an opportunity for you to support and help them through those moments. And I go back to the story I said at the beginning. Oftentimes, it's that connection with another person that reminds us that our humanity is actually our core strength, and our ability to tap into that humanity to help our teams, to help clients understand what the opportunity is and the value that we bring is the strength that no robot, no algorithm can ever eclipse. And so I leave you with that thought. Thank you, you've been a great audience, and thank you again to my volunteers.
Okay.